This video is an addendum to the Linux Mint Easy Install video. So you must already have made a choice about which drive to install to. This is assuming we got as far as wanting to choosing which drive to install to and the graphical slider for how much space to allocate Linux, and we didn't like what drive options it gave us, if at all, and then this is for you. Now, the first thing I should elaborate on, which I touched on lightly, rather awkwardly at the end of the first video, is how Linux names your drives. So where you noted down your drives, drive 0, drive 1, drive 2, in Linux your drives will be SDA, SDB, SDC. So the SD is just a drive. It's like SATA disk or something. And the part that is important is A, B, C, D. So I've got 4 drives, A, B, C, D. That's the same as your drive 0, drive 1, drive 2. And then the partitions on those drives, they are listed with the same as the drive name but a number next to it. So the first drive is SDA, and the first partition on the first drive is SDA1. Second partition on the first drive is SDA2, and so on. So sure enough, if I go to SDD, it's called SDD1, and there's no other partitions on that drive. So you get the idea. So that's how you know which drive you're talking about when you come from Windows to Linux and you're choosing which drive to install to. That's kind of important. And yeah, so to start with, we're going to open Gparted, which is the Linux equivalent of Windows disk management. So just hit the start menu just like you would in Windows and type Gparted, the way it's spelled here, Gparted. It'll come up as the first result. Click it and you've got this window here. Now the first thing you're going to want to do, if you haven't already, is shrink the drive to make space for your Linux partition. And I'm going to show you how to do it, but I'm not going to actually do it because I've already done it and it took like an hour and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to use this drive as an example. It's full. It's not full. It's one partition big. It's the whole partition, it's the whole drive. And this yellow here is how much data. Well, it's basically how this white space is how much you can shrink it down if you wanted to. So if you right click on the partition you want to shrink to make space for a new Linux partition, you right click on it, you click resize move, and you don't have to use the numbers, you can use the graphic. If you want to pull it all the way down to the minimum amount you can, which you probably don't want to do, you can do that. You can choose a rough amount here and it says free space following. You can take that as 48 gigabytes, that 48 there, because this is in megabytes. It's not accurate, but you can if you want. If you want to be accurate, like me, decide how much space you want and then use the calculator. And you can, so just say I want to make 60 gig free. I would open the calculator, which I'll do now. It's just, you'll find a lot of things in Linux Mint real easy in the start menu, just calc, same as Windows. I would, if I want 60 gigs, I will type 60 times 1024, and that is the amount of megabytes you should enter to get a round gigabyte figure when you're viewing the drive in Windows or Linux, because that is what a gigabyte is. It's 1024 megabytes. So if I just copy that, and if I put it straight here, I think it might be not, you might want to move the, yeah, it's moved. I kind of wanted to keep, I didn't want to shift and lose that unallocated space at the start of the drive for reasons to do with booting, which I won't bother going into just yet. So what I'm going to do is take the value that's there. Hope this doesn't bore you, just because I'm pedantic, right? You just paste that there, paste that value that's there, copy, put her in there, and I want to, this is the cool thing about Linux Calculator, I want to subtract the value that I got equals that figure. If I put that new figure in the new size, then the remaining space on the end should be, well, there was some extra 1 megabyte space there, but whatever. you know, but that'll give me my thing. If I go OK, oh, and the other thing about Gparted is unlike Windows Disk Management, it doesn't do it when you click the button. Now, yes, it's moving partition, but I'm not actually going to do it. Notice there's no cancel option. See this? One operation pending, move, blah, 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 blah. That's because it moved the start of the partition, which you don't really want to do anyway. But the point is that you can just make changes and nothing will happen until you click apply, and then it will just do everything in order. So you can walk away if it's taking a long time. So, but you can just undo that. I can undo, or I could delete from here. If it was a new partition that I created, I can just delete it. So you can actually muck around, like I'll just undo that. You could say, you know, resize. I'll just show you how flexible it is, because you're going to want to change this yourself later. I could go like that, and then I could go, now I can space, I go new, maybe this much. Yeah, can I do that? Yep. And make another one, and give it the rest of the space, and be like, oh, actually I don't want that one, delete it. And it's not doing it in real time, it's just working out what it needs to do by the time you hit apply after all you're messing around. So that's really cool, I think. It's way better than, I think it's a better system than Windows' one. Now, with the resize, I'm not going to have it in my example, but I've showed you how to do it. So you're going to have the resize there as your first step, and then you're going to add the other partitions. In fact, you're probably going to, after I go through the other steps and show you what sizes the other partition should be, you're probably going to want to go back anyway, choose a new size, thinking, oh, well, my RAM's this big, so I'm going to have this much swap space, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, that's probably going to happen. So, now, just a quick one. The first thing you do, if it's a GPT disk, which this is only if you're making a new new Linux stuff on a GPT disk. If you're installing to MBR, you don't have to do this. In fact, you shouldn't. The first thing you would do is you would go right-click, new, a new partition that is only 2 megabytes big. The type is unformatted, way down the bottom of the list there. Oh, you can't see it on the screen. Hang on. Let me try that again. Way down the bottom of this line. There it is, I just made it. Unformatted, and label it boot for your own reference. It doesn't mean anything to the system, but that's just so you know what it is when you see it in a list. Click add. You want to do that, and you want to go apply, which I won't do because I'm just doing this as an example. And after you apply, because you kind of can only do the second step after you've applied, you you right click on it. I can't do it because I haven't applied, but once you've applied and it's done that new little 2 megabyte partition, you right click on it, and then you click manage flags, and then you click it'll be called BIOS grub, which is not giving me the option here because I'm mucking around. Hang on. There we go. I just paused the video and found a GPT partition to right click on. You click this, BIOS grub. You won't have that. Nothing will be ticked. You click BIOS grub, you click close. You don't have to click apply after that because the flag setting thing happens immediately. So that's if you're doing this on a GPT disk. That's your boot partition. MBR, on the other hand, you don't need to do that because it stores its boot information at the start of the disk in a very old-fashioned, limited way. But on the upside, we don't have to manually make the boot partition. So I'll undo everything. Now, this one's specifically to MBR disks. If you can only have 4 primary partitions on an MBR disk. What does that mean? It means we don't choose primary partition. We just only choose one thing. Every time you make, what we're going to do for MBR, not GPT, is right click on the free space that we'll have after our resize, the unallocated, and go new and say extended partition. That takes up the full amount of the free space. You go add. Now you have this free space there still. that's essentially contained inside the extended partition. It's an old-fashioned workaround to not having enough partitions in the MBR format, but this is all you do. It just means more clicks. You got this new free space, and in there you make your new partitions that we're about to make. These are the actual partitions, and they're all going to be called logical partitions. So you'll get the same result in the end. It's just a few more clicks for MBR disks. So now back on track. In either case, whether it's GPT or MBR, we're going to make our 3 partitions, the 3 main partitions for a Linux install. There are 3. They're of specific sizes depending on what you want, and that'll become apparent, and that's why you're probably going to want to go back and redo how much space you're giving it. So the first one is the system partition, the part that Linux actually gets installed to. I want it to be, in my case, I've got 64 gig free. I've already planned this out. I wanted to give 50 gig to my system partition. So 50 times 1024 is that. I'll take my existing value here, copy, clear that, paste it here. And I want to minus the value I just got, equals that. Whoops, hang on, I did the wrong thing. Sorry, the more mathematically astute of you watching would have probably pointed out my error. Yes, now that I have that new value, I actually want to put in the remainder of that, what it is going to be after I subtract that. So I'll just paste the amount of space that's there, subtract what's going to be left, equals I may have confused myself, but yeah, that's going to be a 50 gig partition, which will mean I'll have 14 gig free after that. So that's 14 gig-ish. Now, anyways, the point is, you've got a document to go by. It's going to be ext, and we'll just call it system for our own reference. So yes, there's our first one. It's our Linux system drive. I've labeled it for my own reference. It's 50 gigabytes. Yeah, that turns out to be a nice round figure when you multiply by 1024. Now, in the 14 gigabytes remaining space, the second partition we want, I'm giving it 10 gig. I already know what that is when you multiply by 1024, because obviously you just add a 0. So hang on a sec. Numlock's on by default. Annoying. Now, where are we? 1024. Oh, that's 10 gig. Again with the ext4. I'm going to call it data. Now, in Linux, you can mount any folder in Linux to any partition, and when you view a Linux file system, it's all folders. You don't see drive letters. Something I probably should have led with. That's a really cool, fascinating thing. So when you might be used to mounting a drive, you might specify a folder and you mount it as a drive letter so you can access it as a drive. It's kind of weird. In Linux, everything's folders, so if you have a partition or a drive, you always mount it as some folder in the folder structure. And in this case, and we've got a data partition, it's for Linux's home folder. The home folder is the user folder. In the home folder is the folder name for each user who's logging into the system, and in our case, when we're dual booting, we just want a basic Linux space just for Linux and the programs we install and not our own data. We still want 10 gigabytes for that home folder. Even though we're not going to store our files there, it's where the files are downloaded to when you download files, and it's where Dropbox will sync to by default if you install Dropbox. So I just want to give a bit of 10 gig for the home folder. And the reason it's a good idea to have a separate home folder in Linux as a habit is if you are using it as your main system, you can have all your private files in the home folder, and because it's a separate partition, when you go to Gparted, you can blow away the system partition, reinstall a new version of Linux or an upgrade or something, and then as you install that version of Linux, you mount your home data partition as the home folder, and you're back in business. Hit the ground running. All your files are there when you get into the new system. So it's just always a good idea, even when using Windows. I do too. I already do in Windows. I have a separate partition for my Windows drive. I know a lot of people do. It's quite common these days, and that's how you do it in Linux. It's going to be the home partition, but it's going to be a home folder. So I'm going to be giving it 10 gig, and the remaining 4 gig, in my case, I'm giving as my swap drive. So without rushing through it, that should be 4096, I believe. But anyway, let me see. A free space proceeding, that's probably why. Anyway, that's fine. That's meant to be there. It's not important, it just looks nice. Now, swap file. So, yeah, in Windows you have a swap file, and because it's a file on an existing partition, it's subject to fragmentation to the rest of the drive, where files are actually stored in little bits and bytes around the drive, and they get moved around and you get slower access times. In Linux, there's always this separate partition, a very super optimized partition for the swap, called the swap partition, and that's where the memory spills out, the RAM spills out into that partition instead of a file on your hard drive where everything else is, which is more efficient. So the general rule is you want to give it half the space of your RAM, and I've got 8 gig, so I'm giving it 4 gig. There's no hard and fast rule to that. That's just the general, thing at the moment. So again, you just leave this as primary like all the others, but in our case it's MBR, it's going to be logical. The file system is Linux, whoop, off the screen again. The file system for the swap drive is Linux swap. And then Linux knows to format it as a special swap partition, excuse me. And I'm just going to call it swap for my own reference. That's that. They're your 3 main Linux partitions, and if it's a GPT formatted drive, there'll be that extra small boot partition too. But these are the 3 essential ones, and I'm happy. So this is the point where you, knowing what you know now after watching, can go back and choose how much size exactly you want, factoring in, I want 50, X amount of gigabytes for the system, which should be 50 at the smallest. Then I want 10 for my home maybe, or more if you want, and that your RAM will be half your RAM. So calculate that new figure, do your shrink space, and if it's a GPT, do your boot, small boot partition, and then these 3 main partitions here. So pause it here and do that, and I'm now going to apply those, and then I'm going to wait. Now, are you sure you want to apply? It's just a warning, just a general warning. You want it should back up, and it's just going to create it. And for me, it's going to take a couple of seconds, but with the resize involved on an MBR disk, it'll take an hour. So leave it running, go have dinner, whatever. But then it's all done. So mine's all done. This is just Gparted refreshing the view. You do not have to wait for this. This is just, it's starting again. What you want to do now though is take note of what these partitions are called. So you should know what drive it is. Mine's SDC. These are going to be SDC 3, 4, 5 or something. So I'm going to let Gparted finish refreshing, and I'm going to keep it open. So you should keep it open as a reference to what your new partitions are called, because you're going to look for them when you do the custom install in Linux Mint. So you don't have to wait for it, you can just leave it, but it's refreshed by the time I unpause the video, so I'm going to put it over here as a reference. I've just run install Linux Mint off the desktop, just as we did in the basic install. There it is. Continue. It's the same as before. This part's the same. You click that, you get continue, there's going to be some sort of a wait, and I'll pause the video. And after the little wait, or slightly longer wait, we're here again. And we want to choose something else. As you probably guessed, this is the custom install. We're going to click continue. You might get a window pop up that says, do you want to unmount drives? You can click no, because that is so that you can make partition changes, but we've done all our partition changes in Gparted already. It's just a bit faster than using this interface here, which applies every change as you do it, which is a bit more clumsy. So let's find our drive. Which one is it out of all these? Dev, SDA, look at all these. Well, we left it open, and it's SDC is the drive I chose, and I know that. I'm off by heart now. That's my third physical drive that I want to install to, so I could just go straight down to SDC anyway. But there it is, SDC, and sure enough, there's the multitude of partitions that we made. Notice they're numbered up high from 5. That's because we've got an extended partition because of this whole MBR thing, but that's fine. If it was GPT, you'd probably see it as you'd expect it to be with 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, I made a poet out of myself there. Yeah, look, this matches up quite nicely. It's hiding this extended partition thing. These are the actual partitions, so 5, 6, and 7. There we are, SDC 5, 6, and 7. It's like a direct path. You don't even have to know the drive letter. You see what I mean? Anyway, it makes more sense. Folders for files, folders for drives. Yeah, and I can double check the sizes. You know, it looks about right. So here's what we do from here. Now that we've got our partitions ready to go, we've got to tell Linux to install there. Find the system partition that you made. I noticed that our labels don't show up here. Don't worry about it. That's why we're going off our file sizes and our drive letter names. This is my system partition, the 50 gig one. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click change and set the following settings. Change this to ext4. We don't have to format it because it's already blank. That's just a quick format that happens when you make the partition. You just do it again here, a quick format. It's not a long one, it's a quick format. Just deletes the file allocation table. If you were installing to a partition and you had files on it, you could check that. But anyways, the main thing is ext4 is the format we want, and the new important part, we put / here for the mount point. The mount point is how you say what folder the partition's mounted as. Remember, we've been rambling on about how everything's a folder in Linux. The system drive is the top level of the tree, and the top level is just one / all by itself. So that's the mount point. We call that root in Linux, the root of the folder structure. So yeah, click OK. Then we pause. It's any previous change have you written to disks, blah blah blah. It's not true. We're not resizing. It's just warning us. It'll take a couple of seconds and it will refresh the view. And we'll go to our data partition next. I'm just pausing out the long wait here while it refreshes. Okay, and it refreshed and scrolled to the top of the list again. So we'll go back and find where we are. There we are. There's the newly can be mounted as root. We go to our data partition, the one we created, SDC6 in my case. We do the same thing. We click on it. We click change. We put ext4, but this time, remember I was saying it's going to be the home drive? Mount point is home, /home, like that. That's the folder that this partition will then appear under. The thing is, once they're all mounted, you don't see the partitions or drive, you just see a big folder structure. And that makes things operating very simple in Linux. Now I can go OK, because that's the only difference between what we just did is just /home instead of just /. That happened instantly. There's nothing we have to do for the swap partition because we said the format type was Linux swap, so it finds it all by itself. And if you may doing this on a GPT drive, that boot flag we set on the boot partition will also tell it that that's the boot partition. So again, we don't have to do anything special for that either. Finally, there's a drop down here. it should have already detected the right place to put the boot files, which is typically going to be the first disk, SDA. Don't change that unless you know what you're doing. Just leave it. So it's going to replace the Windows boot with the Linux boot, which is called grub2 these days. From here, we can just click Install Now. Don't worry about this warning. It's just saying you didn't say for me to format anything. That's not, we should be formatting it for installing. Well, I already know that the drive's blank, so we don't have to do it. Save ourselves a bit of time. Just a warning, please make sure you've backed up any critical data. It's just warning me that because you didn't format it, it's going to stomp over what's there. Fine. Continue. And you haven't created anything. Yeah, we haven't created any partitions in your system because we did it in Gparted because it's a bit faster. So it's just warning me you didn't create any. It doesn't want to stomp over anything, but it's fine. We know what we're doing. That's why it's the custom install. Click continue. And then I believe it is the same as the easy install video or document process that I have going on. So pretty much you can, I might as well click through it now. Got my name here. It's my login name. That's just the name it made up based on the motherboard. I'm going to put this. Just because that's what will be seen as a network. You can't have a username that starts with a capital. It's got to be a lowercase, and choose a very simple password because you'll be typing it not too much, just every time you install the program, that sort of thing. Log in automatically and continue. And that's it, it's installing now. So here is where I'll leave off for this video, and the next video or document you should look at is the setup document, the setup video, because that'll give us some nice things to get rolling, hit the ground running if you're a Windows user, show you just how neat and simple other things are, and yeah, that's where you should pick up next. So see you in the setup video.